All right. Good morning, everyone. Looks like it's 9 o'clock. So I'm just letting a few more people in here and we will get started. All right. Um, Welcome to November. I'm not sure how that's possible, but here we are. And we are going to talk about USPS calendar year end. So amazingly enough, it's that time of year again. And we'll go over everything relating to the USPS side of getting your W-2s ready for your districts and helping them get closed for calendar year end 2024. Before we get started, I just wanted to point out that we did have intentions of, I know that if any of you noticed that the session title it included talking about quarter year end. We decided that it might be a little bit too much to cover quarter year end in depth along with the calendar year end process in one session. So we have moved the quarter year end review to the first quarter of 2025. So we're going to move that to a session all by itself, and we'll talk about that and everything about quarter year end in more detail and be able to spend the appropriate amount of time on it and review it in a session all by itself. So I wanted to point that out. So look for that to come in 2025. This morning, we're going to talk about, what's happening in 2020 for 2024. We'll go over the calendar year end checklist. Just a quick review of for those of you that use the ITCM program, and then talk a little bit about the W2C process as well. So we have a lot to cover, a lot of resources that we're going to talk about. So we'll go ahead and get started here. I put together, and it's posted on as a link on our SSDT meetings and trainings page as well, a little PowerPoint just talking about those changes that we had for 2024. And there aren't a lot, but I thought, it might be easier to point them out, putting them together in some kind of document so you have that for future reference. So talking about the updates, it was a minor update to the W-2 state options, in particular the West Virginia state option. And last year, I know this probably doesn't affect a lot of you ITCs, but we did have mentioned that the state of West Virginia, I'm sorry, does not accept a value in position 27 of the RE record. So we actually, made a change to the software to remove that character that was in position 27. It's actually an optional field, and for us at SSDT, we use that field to determine whether the employee is a Medicare employee or a non-Medicare employee, and it would have the value of Q or R in that position. And the state of West Virginia does not allow anything in that position. So this year, those files should not be rejected for those of you that have the state of West Virginia districts. What's brand new for this year was we have a brand new option under reports called W-2 SSN verification. So I know that this has been asked for for many, many years now. So that option is now available. So districts can actually create a file, a submission file that can be uploaded then to the business services online to verify employees' SSN information. They then, once they upload that file on their end, then they're gonna go through the checking on their end to make sure what you have or what districts have in their system matches what the Social Security Administration has on file. And then it returns any errors that it finds in differences with that information in a results file. So once districts have that results file back, then they're gonna, save that somewhere on their computer. And then there's an option to generate that or upload that results report file. And then it'll generate a report then of any errors that any differences that the Social Security Administration found. So just to, for those of you that haven't seen that option, just to kind of point that out, it's super simple. So you're going to go under reports, W-2 SSN verification, and then obviously we need to create the submission file first. So it's as simple as just quickly clicking on that generate submissions file option. Once a district has that file back then from the SSA, then they're going to go back and select the report or results report option. They can change the title if they'd like. They can generate this in a CSV file, open it up in Excel, or just generate it in PDF. They can sort this then by SSN or name. They're going to browse then to find that file and then click the generate W-2 SSN verification results report. And that will generate a report then of any errors that the SSA detected. So then they can make those changes and move forward and know that they're not going to have any issues, along that lines when they go to upload their files. I did want to mention that as part of the next release, which is going to be 2024.22, we do, there was a report that if employees had a legal name entered on their employee record, that the submission file was not correctly reporting that legal name. It was just using the regular name instead of looking at those legal name fields. So we do have an issue, and I've listed the issue here to correct that, so that if an employee has information in those legal name fields, it will correctly report that, and that's what will be included in the submission file. So thank you to the ITC that reported that to us so we could quickly get that fixed. All right, so hopefully everybody's as excited as I am about that new option, because I know that's been requested for a bit. What's yet to come? We have a couple issues that are still outstanding that our developers are going to push through before calendar year end 2024 ends. And I think they're hoping to get these on, in the first release in December. And those two issues relate to updating W-2 processing, so that if a payroll item has values of all zeros, but it so that won't print on the employee's W-2. So what I'm talking about is maybe a district mistakenly wanted to stop a payroll item, and instead of actually putting a stop date on that, they just cleared the percentage out. That's gonna continue to accumulate those year-to-date totals on the payroll item for the gross and applicable gross. So if districts posted adjustments to remove those to-date totals because nothing was withheld, it's still printed the actual locality name on the employee's W-2, and that got confusing. And I know cities, were confused by that when they filed their information with those entities. So that will no longer happen. So if the totals, year-to-date totals are all zeros, then the name will not print at all. So that will clear up that confusion. The other update that's going to happen before calendar year end is that we're going to make an improvement to those entity codes on the city records. So we had a request that instead of districts having to maybe look back at those payroll item configurations to know the entity codes, to actually provide those in a drop down. So we will be doing that. So districts can actually, instead of having to, remember those or look those up, they'll be able to go, over to the right hand side, just like they normally do, within that field, and select those then from the drop down. All right. I did not mention, but hopefully you guys are all aware of that. Please put anything in the chat or interrupt me at any time if you have any questions at all. And yeah, great. I'm glad everybody's as excited as I am about those improvements will be very helpful. All right. So that's what we have as far as, the item that was new for this year. The updates to the software to hopefully make, checking those SSNs easier for districts, and then what's yet to come. Next, we're going to move into covering the calendar year end checklist. So I'm sure that you're all aware of where that information resides, but if you're not, I'm going to, take you through that process, and it's under our SSDT meetings and trainings page. Under year-end meetings, we have a link that says 2024 ITC calendar year-end. Okay, so if you go here on the right-hand side is all of the information that deals with the USPS side of things. So we have our calendar year-end checklist, and here's that PowerPoint that I just was going through. So if you need that to reference back to, that's the link where you can find that link. So we're going to go over the checklist here, and I have that open. We do have a disclaimer on, right at the top that says, this is just our sample of a calendar year end checklist. By no means, you can take this checklist, update it, make it your own. So we just put a disclaimer at the top that, if your districts would go out here and happen to look at ours, to please, use yours in case there's anything specific that relates to your ITC. All right. In the first section here, we have all the important dates. So we've updated these to, point out all the various filing entities and those deadlines. So you can see those up at the top here. And then we're going to go into the preliminary calendar year end closing steps. So these are steps that districts can be taking now, and kind of like reminders if they would have these situations that they can go ahead and process these special situations before their last pay of the calendar year. So these sections in the beginning if you have meetings with your districts, in the next few weeks here, point these out, so that, it can make their life a little easier. And they can, be processing these or paying special attention to them, before their last pay in December. The first step, we've added to look, or create that SSN submission file, verification submission file, excuse me. So districts can be doing that at any time. So we point that out right away. We've already kind of touched upon that, so I'll just move past that step. And then the next is those life insurance costs above or over $50,000. So in each of these steps, we have kind of put a lot of effort into making, reference another document to help you work through those steps and how it's working in the system, how it taxes those or does not tax these special situations. In this case, it's helping calculate the cost. So, if you click on this link here, it's going to take you to the reporting taxable amounts section in this case. And then we have a special document that actually walks you through, again, oops, move it to the top here. Calculating the cost and then again, processing this with a payroll, or later, in the checklist will come back and it points you to the steps if a district did not process this as part of their, final pay of the calendar year. So again, we've put a lot of effort, in detail into these checklists. So if, there are questions in the cost in this case, or, how to process those payments, refer to these supplemental documents. And I think that can be very helpful, in knowing how the system is using or what's happening with those special situations. So in this case, we've actually put the steps here as well. You're going to go, they'll go to payroll payments future or current, and they're going to then, add that employee into the payroll. And then in this case, they're going to use the pay type of life insurance premium. So, they'll enter the rate as the calculated cost of that life insurance, and they're going to click save. So the system will process this payment, right along with their payroll. And then again, in that supplemental document, we kind of step through, the reports it's going to affect, what the system does as far as taxing that or not taxing it. So, use those, if districts have balancing questions, though these supplemental documents can be super helpful in helping figure those kind of things out. Next is adoption assistance. So these were known as NC2 payments in Classic. So for those of you that are still stuck on Classic terms, we've included these, we'll probably do that for a couple years, and then nobody's going to want to, reference or talk about Classic anymore, right? So, excuse me, those can be removed. But for the time being, we've included those as well. So if you're still stuck on those terms, they were known as NC2 payments. Again, we have, a document, a supplemental document that covers then everything about adoption assistance. So if I go back, you can see the first link here is adoption assistance. And again, it's going to step you through, kind of talking about adoption assistance, what it does as far as, the taxation part of it, and then, how it's going to be coded when it comes to the W-2 side of things. So again, reference these documents. In this case, they're going to enter, the payment and future current, and they're going to enter the pay type as adoption assistance. And then, enter the amount that they need to report on the W-2. Okay. All right. Step 4, are any of those NC3 payments, as we knew in Classic, or those non-cash taxable benefits? So again, going back to that supplemental reporting taxable amounts, we have a document specific to non-cash taxable benefits, and that's going to, again, walk you through as far as what, the taxation side of things, the reports that are affected or not affected, and help you, understand what the system's doing when you use that kind of payment type. So again, you're going to enter that in future or current, select the non-cash taxable benefits option, and then enter the benefit amount that needs to be reported on the employee's W-2. Okay. So those are kind of all the special situations that districts can be taking now, and entering those, at any time really, before their last pay in December. The other things, items that districts can be kind of looking at, checking now, just to make sure that everything is ready to go, is their OSDI W-2 abbreviations. So when it comes to the OSDI records, all of those, the OSDI codes need to be listed first, followed by any descriptions. So the codes are what's required. We have a link here for all those OSDI codes and a whole list of what those need to be. So if you need, if districts need to reference those, they're linked here. And then you can, they can go to the OSDI, go to the payroll item grid, I'm sorry, and then filter that by the OSDI type, and then review the W-2 abbreviation column and make sure that all of those codes are listed first. So if I go to core and then I go to payroll item configuration, and under the type, I search OSDI, I'm looking and making sure that my W-2 abbreviation column is listed on my grid. And you can see here, the first line is listed correctly. So it has the code, the required code, followed by any description. And these remainder lines would need to be updated. So these are incorrect. So correct and then incorrect. All right. Okay. Next are verifying that the city W-2 abbreviations are correctly listed. So when it comes to cities, the first 6 characters are what will print on the employee's W-2. So again, you'll go to the payroll item configuration screen. You'll filter the grid by city tax, and then you need to review the W-2 abbreviation column and make sure there's a value listed there. So if I go to, I'm going to filter by city, you can see here that the very first line for my Columbus City tax has the W-2 abbreviation listed. All of these others would need to be corrected. Okay, so correct and incorrect. We do point out the state of Indiana is different in the fact that they also require a county withholding. So again, I don't know how many ITCs this affects, but if you do have districts that are withholding the state of Indiana, You do want to, remind them that the state of Indiana does require this county tax withholding as well. I mean, would want to make sure that that is set up properly as well. So we've outlined here what needs to be checked. So, the payroll item configuration record needs to be in place. And it has to have the type equaling the city tax. And then you would have to have an assigned payee that has an Indiana state address. And then the payroll item for the on the employee side has to have the deduction type set to residents or I'm sorry, just residents. So there's a employee or residence option. It has to be set to a residence, and then it has to have the appropriate Indiana county code. And we've linked how to the document that outlines, all of those county codes. That has to be in on the payroll item record. If you go under that standard CF section in code 1, okay? So that is where you can find those county codes. Just a reminder, if districts are using 1 through 9, it does require that to be a 2-digit county code. So make sure they're entering those as 01, 02, put the 0 in front of it is what I'm trying to say, to make sure that that's a 2-digit code. Okay. All right. Any questions about that? All right, we'll move forward then to step 7, and that's entering those city tax entity codes. So for all cities, you want to verify that the payroll item configuration, the entity code on that record is entered. So the tax entity code allows a submission file basically to be created, whether that be by paper or by electronically. So for those that are filing electronically, you want to verify that that tax entity code is listed. And if there are questions about what code needs to be entered, districts really need to reach out to that appropriate city and verify what code they require. If they're filing by paper, then we do just recommend that they enter the first 5 letters of that city name. Okay. But again, without that entity code, the submission file cannot be created. So districts are going to want to verify that that code's, entered and entered correctly. So they'll go to back to that payroll item configuration grid, and then they're going to filter the grid by city and then verify each city record and look at that tax entity code. So if I go to payroll item configuration, and again, I have the city already filtered on my grid. I'm going to open that up, and here is that tax entity code field that I'm talking about. Unfortunately, there's not currently, there's not an option under more, to add that to the grid. So those records, will have to be opened, and then you can verify that, those are entered correctly. All right. Next, we're going to move on to those, reporting entities, city reporting entities like RETA and CCA. So for RETA, they're a little easier to set things up. For those districts that do, or I'm sorry, those city tax entities that do report to RETA, you want to verify that those payroll item configuration screens have the RETA code and the description entered. So again, you can go to that payroll item configuration grid, you can filter by the city. And then you can open those RITA records and make sure that the code and the description are entered. We do have a link here to the RITA website, and that's going to help you, know which codes and descriptions to enter. But I'm sure you're all aware of what I'm talking about. But if you're not, if you scroll down to the bottom, and we do have an issue to move these, fields, this RITA section to be underneath or towards the top of the screen. So it's not kind of lost in the shuffle, so to speak. So eventually that will happen, but it's at the very bottom for now. You'll enter, the code, as I mentioned, and then the RITA description. Okay. When it comes to CCA, they are, whoops, I did want to point out, I'm sorry, for those employees that have that city tax withholding, you want to make sure that on the payroll item that the deduction type is marked as employment or residence. So again, you can go to the grid, and I'm going to go to core, and I'm going to go to payroll item, and then payroll item grid, or a payroll item, and it's going to take you to the payroll item grid. And I'm going to go in the upper left hand corner, and I'm going to select city tax item. This opens up, fields or columns, I should say, that are specific to this payroll item type. So when you select the city tax item, it allows me then to add the deduction type to my grid, and I can easily, scroll down. I can even, sort this if I need to, in a manner that would be helpful to check by employment or resident. It'll bring the blank records to the top so I can see, hey, somebody's missing. I could create a report, in Excel and filter it that way if it's easier, whatever's, easiest for districts to check that information. So there's two parts, making sure the payroll item configuration is set correctly, and then the payroll item for those employees that are having that city tax item withheld. All right, when it comes to CCA, they're a little more difficult. Again, we have the link here listed that'll take you to the CCA website, and then, give you more information and details about, their reporting. But again, when it comes to the payroll item configuration side of things, you want to make sure that the CCA code is entered. You want to make sure that there's a description, and then also that CCA checkbox is marked. So when I go to the payroll item configuration option, and I'm going to filter this by city, and I will open this one up. So I thought I had, can't remember which one I had here. I thought I had one of these set up so we could see it. I guess not. Anyway, you would enter in the CCA section, you're going to enter then the CCA code, the CCA description, and check the box here that says report to CCA. Okay. Again, reference, their website to determine, their codes, their descriptions, and so forth. Now, they're a little bit more fussy in the fact that they have these 3 appendix, and districts will want to pay particular attention to these 3 appendix, because city codes have to be entered on the cities that are in these lists. So if they are a CCA city, or not a CCA city, they have to be reported to CCA in a specific manner. So kind of go down this list, and that'll guide you through how these cities need to be set up. If the city is listed in Appendix A, then they need to enter on the payroll item configuration, they need to enter a valid CCA code, a valid CCA name, and they check the box that they report to CCA. If the city is not listed in Appendix A, but it is listed in Appendix B, then the payroll item configuration is going to be enter a valid CCA code, a valid CCA city name, but they do not check the report to CCA box. If a city is not listed in Appendix A, B, or C, then the payroll item configuration screen should be set up with the CCA code left blank, a valid CCA name, and the report to CCA box unchecked. So the valid CCA name is based on the name found in this link that we've provided below. So they're, a little bit more difficult. And I know several of you had issues with your districts in CCA last year. So hopefully things will go a little smoother this year. I guess we'll find out, but we've tried to, be very helpful in setting up those city payroll item configuration options. So follow along with these steps and, work through, how those records need to be set up. If there's any employees having CCA, city tax withheld, or any other city tax withheld, we have to make sure that, again, on the payroll item, that the deduction type is set to employment or residence. So again, you're going to go to the payroll item under that payroll item, under the city, filter it by the city type, and then on the deduction type, make sure that, for all your employees, and I'm saying all, that's set to employment or resident. Okay. Yeah. So there was a question in the chat that Andrew asked about other ITCs getting errors back from CCA about not having valid postal addresses. And absolutely, we had a lot of questions about that last year. There was a comment that yes, it was very difficult. Again, we have, the next step is to make sure that employee addresses are following, the US Postal Service. So we have provided a link to what CCA is, asking those addresses be, and how those need to be entered. So yeah, I feel for you, because that, is not something that's a lot of verifying. And, it could be a simple spelling something out or not spelling something out, or a period, or, it's very trivial in my opinion. So I understand the frustration, but we do have this link here. If districts get hung up on how those addresses should be entered, hopefully that will help. Again, I know it was very painful last year. Okay. Next then is making sure that if you do have districts that are withholding other state tax, that they have a valid state ID. So if you go to the payroll item configuration grid, you can filter that by state type, and then you would view each state payroll item to make sure that there's a valid, uh, state ID entered. So in this case, I'm gonna just put state here, and there's a state tax, and the field that I'm talking about is this state ID field. So just make sure that the valid state ID is entered here. And then step 11 is making sure that your HSA payroll item configurations have the annuity type set to other. So, I know there's been a couple instances where districts have had this set to something else, and it's not the most fun to clean up. So, verify this is set to other, now, before it's too late, so that it's hopefully a little less painful if we do have to correct something. So again, I'm gonna, filter this by HSA. Oops. I am not sure why that's, oh, I'm sorry, I have to spell it out, that's why. And I have to spell it correctly, there we go. So if I open this up, here's the field that I'm talking about, and making sure that that annuity type is set to other. Okay, again, that just gets information reported correctly on the W-2. So we need to make sure that that's set up as it should be. All right. And I have health here. So, if you follow along on the checklist and you don't want to filter the grid by HSA like I did, you have to spell out the word health. Next is moving on to the W-2 configuration screen. And we want to make sure that this is set up correctly. So based on whether you're asking your districts to submit their own information or whether you are submitting it on their behalf. So this just assures that the header, and the footer, record in the submission files gets created correctly. So this is very important. If the district is submitting their own information, then they want to check that box that says district will submit own W-2 files. If you're submitting on the district's behalf, then obviously that checkbox should not be marked. We also want to make sure that the option that says to include only last 4 digits of the SSN on W-2 forms and the XML output is checked or not checked based on whether the district wants the full SSN printed on their W-2 and included in their submission files, or whether they want it truncated to just list the last 4. That is, well, I'm going to keep going. I'm sorry. You'll want to also then review the company information, the submitter information, the contact information, and make sure that all of that's correct. So if I go to System and Configuration, if I go down to W-2 configuration, this is, the fields and the checkboxes that I was talking about. So, if there's not been a change since last year, because this was in place last year, then hopefully all of this information is already entered and it's correct. But here's the district will submit own W-2 files. So if this has changed from last year, you would check that box. If they only want the last four, to be included on the output files, then they want that box to be checked. And then here's the company name information, the contact information, the submitter information. And then if the submitter and address is the same as the company, then they would want this box checked. Okay, so if you are somebody that's submitting on your district's behalf, then you're the submitter, so you'd enter that down here. Actually, you're going to enter that in ITCM, so it probably doesn't matter. But obviously you'd have this box unchecked up here. I'm just curious, I think there's still at least one ITC that's submitting on their IT or on their district's behalf. Do we still have quite a few? Are you guys submitting for your districts? Is anybody still doing that? Okay, got it. Okay, there's a lot. All right. I was just curious. Perfect. I was just taking a look here. Okay. So yeah, based on, how you're submitting or not submitting, that W-2 configuration screen would need to be set up accordingly. And we have a note about, registering with the Social Security Administration, the BSO system and getting that submitter ID. And hopefully, you have that from last year. Think that might require you to change or update your password. I know that they've added like an extra layer of security, like, MFA. So I'm not 100% sure if that was in place last year as well, but I did see that on their website this year. So, all right. Step 13 is running the OPSI report. So this, if it's applicable for your district, we kind of, put a required option or flag behind this. If they don't run this now as part of calendar year end, it does get a little messy to try to recreate this report, at a later time. So, we've put this, step in place and kind of flagged it as required, just so it doesn't get missed, because this is the time districts are going to want to run that report, so that it gives them all the information and the correct information that they need at a later time when they're needing something to provide to OPSI. So we've included the options here to run the report. If districts aren't familiar with this OPSI report, they can go out, or if you're not currently using it, they can go out to our report repository, under the public shared reports library, and they can, download that report definition. It's under the calendar year end based reports, and then import into their report manager. So, if you're not familiar with that and what it looks like, I've already gone out and I've imported that. It's called, the OPSI report here. And then here's just a quick snapshot of what it looks like. So it's going to give them, all the information that they need to provide, to give OPSI when that time comes. Yeah, sure. I know we had a lot of questions on, getting that report when they actually are needing it, and it's really tough. It's not very easy to recreate. So that can be helpful. Now, all right. So that is all of the preliminary stuff that districts can be doing now, before it's too late. Be thinking about, be entering, be processing, before their last pay in December. Once they're done with their last pay in December, their month-end closing is not any different than any other month-end closing. So we've kind of compressed these steps and just added links to our checklist here for both month-end and quarter-end because they're basically going to go through the same process that they do any other month-end or any other year-end or quarter-end close. So those steps don't change. They can click on those links or refer to your closing procedures for those two processes, and then we can move on to W-2 processing. So just a kind of a bullet that we have here in their processing before they get, after, if they've processed their last pay in December, but they're not ready to process their W-2s, they can, go ahead and leave December, that posting period, open. It does not have to be current for them to come back and process their W-2s. And then they're going to create their January posting period, and then they can make that posting period current, and they can process then their first pay in January. So they do not need to, come back and make December current in order to do any W-2 processing. And we kind of tried to make this a little more clear because we did have a lot of questions last year, like, do we have to make it? Do we have to go back and make W-2 processing current or not? So hopefully this clears up any confusion. No, they absolutely do not need to make December current. These are the steps that they need to take and how those posting periods work when they're ready to come back. All right. So when they are ready to come back to process their W-2s, they're going to begin then with step 16. So this these first steps here under W-2 processing, in particular steps 16 through 23, these are a repeat of steps 2 through 12 in the preliminary calendar year end section, closing section that we just talked about. So if those steps were not already completed, then we have a note here to make sure that steps 16 through 23 are completed now. If they've checked all of those boxes, steps 2 through 12 above, they can skip on down then to step 24. Okay, so we've included everything that we just talked about once more, just to make sure that it doesn't get missed. So all of these, steps that we just talked about, again, are repeats of that preliminary calendar year-end closing section. All right. All right, so we will jump ahead then to, whoops, I want to see one thing. I actually think that I need to change this. I just realized that. Sorry for all the scrolling. We want to make, I'm going to change this because we actually need you to start with dependent care. So dependent care this is where, that's why. All right, I'll get that changed. I have duplicate numbers here, so I didn't notice that before. I apologize. I will get that updated and get that corrected right after our meeting today. So sorry, my bad. That's why it didn't make sense. We're going to start with dependent care. So again, if districts have any dependent care that needs to be processed that was not processed as part of any payroll using that dependent care payroll type, then they can actually go ahead and create an adjustment. And this will be to the federal tax payroll item, and they would use the dependent care type and then enter the amount of that dependent care. So we have a note here that says, and the amount exceeding the maximum amount of $5,000 is actually what will be added to the employee's total gross and applicable gross on the various payroll items. So again, if they enter anything under $5,000, then really nothing extra is going to happen. It's when they enter, anything above that $5,000 maximum that gets taxed. Okay. And then we've, added notes here that this will, where these special items are going to appear on the employee's W-2. And in this case, it's going to appear in box 10. When it comes to third-party sick pay, again, we have a supplemental document that talks all about, pertaining to third-party sick pay. So if you have questions about that, again, it steps through basically there are two types. So was the third-party sick pay taxable or non-taxable? If it was non-taxable, here's the steps you take and the, where it's going to appear on the employee's W-2. If it's taxable, here are the adjustments that need to be made. And then here's, how it's going to affect certain, certain items when it comes to balancing. Okay. So again, please, reference these supplemental documents. So, that'll be helpful in balancing and knowing, what tax, different tax entities it's affecting or not affecting. If again, we have, the two types listed both on the actual checklist, and we've tried to also include these adjustments, right here in the checklist itself. So you're going to create, the adjustments listed below for the taxable type of third-party sick pay. And if it's not taxable, then you're creating you're creating an adjustment for the federal payroll item and then using the type third-party pay. And then entering that amount of non-taxable third-party pay, the payment amount. Keep in mind that, if Medicare was not withheld, then it will need to be paid for both the employee and the employer. If the district chooses to, they would probably pay that. And then if the district chooses for the employee to reimburse them, that's their call. This information then gets placed in on the employee's W-2 in box 12 as code J. All right, so we've tried to, make these special situations as easy as possible, which I know is kind of impossible, right? They're tricky. When it comes to life insurance, again, if this was not included as part of the employee's pay, for the calendar year, which again was referred to on step 2 of the checklist, then they need to create some adjustments. Okay, if they process this as we talked about in step 2 of the checklist, then nothing else needs to happen. If they didn't, then we're going to make some adjustments. Again, we've addressed all of these, below. This will automatically adjust the total gross and the applicable gross on the federal, the Ohio state tax, city if applicable, and the Medicare payroll items. So nothing else needs to happen as far as the total gross and the applicable gross. It's posting that adjustment to the federal record and using the type of life insurance premium, then it's going to take care of what we just talked about. The withholding side, though, you know, the districts will have to take into account for the Medicare withholding. So we talk about that here, and then the adjustments that will need to happen for the Medicare withholding piece. We did add a note if, you know, when it comes to the city with tax withholding side of things, that's actually determined based on the payroll item configuration. There's a checkbox called tax non-cash earn. If that's marked or unmarked, that's what controls then whether the city tax is withheld or not withheld. So that's all controlled on that checkbox. Okay, again, we have that supplemental document that talks about life insurance. So if you have any questions at all, let me go back. You know, we have this life insurance premium document, and it talks through if it was not withheld through a payroll. I think we have it, yeah, right here. We have it linked at the top. So you can just click on that link and it'll take you, you know, down to that section and walk you through the appropriate steps. All right. Fringe benefits. So districts will want to process any fringe benefit payments. Again, we have a supplemental document called Fringe Benefits for Reimbursable Employee Expenses that kind of walks you through different scenarios and how then those different scenarios need to be reported. A perfect example of this, or a common example, is tuition reimbursement. So again, any tuition reimbursement above $5,250 is considered a fringe benefit. So, you know, districts would create an adjustment for the federal tax payroll item using the type fringe benefits. They would enter then that amount above the limit of $5,250, and that will then place that amount on the employee's W-2 in box 14, coded as fringe. Okay, so you kind of need to take a look at you know, this document and, you know, walk through these different scenarios that we have listed to see, you know, how was it paid, how the district wants it to be reported or look on their W-2. And hopefully we've tried to capture all of the different scenarios. Hopefully one of them will meet, you know, how the district wants that fringe benefit to look and feel on their W-2, and you can follow those different options then. Again, these supplemental documents, you know, hopefully will be super helpful in getting everything set up correctly. So yeah, we just, you know, tuition reimbursement is one of the most common. So we've kind of just provided this, you know, as an example to quickly reference and see, you know, how that should be set up. Moving expenses, probably maybe not so common because this only deals with reimbursements for moving expenses paid to active military employees. So, you know, if that is the case, you know, that is considered a fringe benefit. So, you know, districts will want to create an adjustment to get that reported on the employee's W-2 correctly. And in this case, it's, you know, adding that adjustment using the payroll item federal tax, and then they would use the type moving expenses, and that will place that information on the employee's W-2 in box 12 with a code of P. Okay, so again, probably not too common, but we, placed it on there just in case. Company vehicle, so any payments that are provided to employees for a company vehicle also need to be reported. In this case, they'll add that adjustment for the payroll item, federal tax, and they would use the type vehicle lease and, add that amount, excuse me, of that company vehicle cost in the amount field, and that will place that amount in box 14 on the employee's W-2. Adoption assistance, again, that's known as, those NC2 payments in Classic. If there are situations where adoption assistance needs to be reported on any employee's W-2, if they, process this using the adoption assistance pay type that we talked about in step 3 of the checklist, then nothing else needs to happen. If they did not process this with a payroll during the calendar year, then they will create an adjustment, again, on that, using that payroll item, the federal tax payroll item, and they would use the type adoption assistance. Okay, and we talk here about, that again, that's going to update the total gross and applicable gross on the federal tax record, the city tax record, if applicable, and then the Medicare records. So nothing else needs to happen when it comes to updating those total gross and applicable gross on the tax records that apply. And again, the city record, tax record withholding is based on whether that tax non-cash earn checkbox is marked or not. The adoption assistance then, again, is placed on the employee's W-2 in box 12, and it will be coded with T. Okay. All right. We talked earlier, and it was, in step 4 on the checklist about non-cash taxable benefits. And again, we have a document that talks about these. We talked about that supplemental document before. If these were processed as part of an employee's pay, then nothing else needs to happen. If they were not, then we again outline those steps, and it's kind of a repeat of what we just talked about. And I think we have this in here twice. I will get that updated as well. I just noticed that. So you would create the adjustment for a federal tax again, and you would use the type taxable benefits. And again, we point out, what this type of adjustment's going to do. It's going to update the total gross and applicable gross on the federal tax, the state tax, the city and OSDI if applicable, as well as the Medicare payroll items. And then we talk about the Medicare side of things, the withholding Medicare side of things. So again, districts are going to have to pay that Medicare, both the employee and the employer amounts, and we talk through then those adjustments that will need to be taken or created for the Medicare part. Okay. Employer health coverage cost. If districts run their W-2 reports and all of their health coverage costs look accurate, that probably means that they have their payroll items for health insurance. Those payroll item configuration records all have those employer health coverage checkboxes marked, and they were marked for the entire calendar year. And they're tracking both their employee and their employer amounts on the system. So they're good to go. Nothing else needs to happen. If something is not correct, then they can create adjustments for that. So they can either, update individuals, using just, going and creating those individually by creating adjustments, again, for the federal tax payroll item, and using the type of health insurance. Or if it's, many employees, then they can use mass load, and create a spreadsheet, and then, make sure all the appropriate information is entered on the spreadsheet, and then load that spreadsheet, using the type adjustment journal, to update those totals. We do have, a note here that just to keep in mind that adjustment total is not overriding the existing amount. It actually gets added or subtracted, based on the amount that's in the load file. So it's not an override situation. It's actually, adding or subtracting to what's already there to get, a new total. That information then is placed in box 12, with a code of DD. So that's how the employer health coverage cost part works. Last then is to report any health reimbursement arrangement information. And I'm not sure, if this applies to any of our districts, but we have it on here just in case. This type of plan only applies to employers that have less than 50 full-time equivalent employees. So, and the employer does not offer a group health plan to any of their employees. So again, I'm not sure how often this situation happens, if at all, but we do have, how that needs to be handled for W-2 reporting, if it, if it is the case with any of your districts. Basically, they're entering an adjustment again on the federal tax payroll item, and they would use the health reimbursement type to report any of those amounts. That gets placed in box 12 with code FF. Okay. All right. Are there any questions at all on anything we've talked about regarding special, W-2 reporting, any of those preliminary steps that they can be taking before we jump into W-2 reporting and creating those submission files? All right. Easy peasy, right? Okay, so we are going to jump into the next section on the checklist, and that's then creating your W-2 report, and then moving into the submission files for all the different entities, and then the printing side. So first, districts are going to want to generate their W-2 report for just heirs. So these options here list how to generate the heir report, and make sure that, everything on that report, some are just informational, some are truly, issues that districts need to clean up and make correct before going any further. But we do have in our chapter, the W-2 report and submission chapter, we have all the different warnings and errors listed, and then some details of that error, and pointers to fields that will be helpful then in getting those situations corrected. Okay, so again, please, they want to run the error report first. And that's as simple as just checking the box. If you go to reports, W-2 report and submission, and then, make sure that the report option is selected. And there's a checkbox here that says report employees with errors only. So they want to do that first, check that over, make sure everything's good. Then they can run the report as a whole and verify everything on that report balances, everything looks good. Again, they'll run this as many times as they need to, to make sure that everything balances as expected, and looks good before they go any further. We do have a document, when it comes to the balancing side of things, there's a document called Effects of Special Situations on W-2 Reporting. So that might be helpful in knowing, again, where, let me go back here, different, ways that different special situations affect balancing. So again, it steps you through those situations like adoption assistance, cost of life insurance, dependent care, all those situations that we talked about and how the taxation side of things works. So if there's a balancing issue, this might be helpful in knowing, oh, okay, if I created this type of, adjustment, what effect does that have on my federal tax, my, Medicare, Ohio City, and so forth, retirement. So that can be helpful in those balancing situations. So again, districts, obviously they're going to want to run this over and over and over to, double and triple check and make sure that everything is accurate and in balance, looks good before they move on. The next section then, or next step, is to create your print files. So, based on, again, whether, you at the ITC is printing for your district, whether they're printing, they kind of need to pay attention to, the printing software that's being used to know how, which step to follow when it comes to the printing. So the first section is geared towards printing your employee copies. So again, we have a section that outlines, if you're printing using the 8.5 by 14 Z fold W-2s and using the USPS file, these are the steps that you would want to follow. Okay, so there's that versus if you're printing the employee copies, again, those 8.5 by 14 Z fold W-2s, but in this case, you're using the Edge's accountability software to do that. So there's two different ways, for those of you that are, this might be your first year of, handling calendar year end and printing of W-2s. There's two separate sections. So based on how you at the ITC is handling your printing, you'll want to, pay attention to those two specific sections. So basically, when it comes to using the USPS file, districts would go to, again, W-2 reports, and they're going to use the W-2 mailable forms. Okay, they'll make sure, and I can actually go and show you this. So they'll go through and obviously, they want to double and triple check all this information. These, values are coming from the configuration screen. The sort option can be super important based on, you know, how they want the printing to be sorted for ease of distribution. So make sure that, you know, those get selected, those sort options get selected correctly. You know, double and triple check that the year is 2024. Again, the employer information is coming from the configuration screen. There's a couple options, you know, the showing of the building and department code, as well as including those fringe benefits. So again, make sure that if a district is, you know, wanting to include fringe benefits in box 14, then they want to check the box, and then they're going to go down then and add those specific, you know, payroll items to the selected section down below. Okay, we have a note here. There's only a maximum of 3 that can be printed in box 14. Okay. If nothing is included here, then nothing will be printed in box 14. The lease vehicle, the company vehicle information is always included first. So that will count as one of the 3, you know, maximum values or amounts to print on the W-2 if you have situations like that, or if the district has situations like that, that will always print first, and then followed by any other payroll items listed below. So again, make sure this box is checked if they want those fringe benefits to print in box 14, and then include any payroll items that they want to be printed in the selection box, you know, down below. You know, I don't know how many times, or, you know, especially the first time around, they probably aren't selecting by individual employees, maybe not even pay groups, but that ability is there. If for whatever reason, you know, they want to select and only print or create a print file for those specific people or groups of people. Then they're going to click the generate mailable forms option. And we have that listed, you know, right in the steps here. So once you click that, then you're going to they'll get an informational pop-up box that says that the job started to generate W-2 forms, and it can be located in the W-2 forms output files view. So if we go then, you know, we see that pop-up option or informational message listed below. So if we go then to that output files option, you can see then that it should have gone. All right, I'm not gonna, you can see then, you know, here's the zip file from prior. So, you know, this is, you know, gives you the ability to then download the file to then submit to for printing. Okay. And we have, you know, that listed here, that, you know, the file gets saved to your computer somewhere, and then you're going to submit that W-2, that PDF file to your printer. Now, one thing to point out, because we did have this question a couple times, I remember last year, when the file gets submitted to the printer for printing, make sure that you're choosing the actual size option. I know that sometimes they weren't quite printing as expected until, you know, the actual size option was marked. So make sure that when you're submitting that file to the printer to choose that option, and then they should print, you know, just perfect. Yeah, sure, Andrew, go right ahead.
Thanks, Lori. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Okay. So when you do the city option, and I don't know, we haven't quite gotten there yet. but just really in any option, I figured I'd ask now.
Yeah, sure.
When you print, um, it'll always grab any overflows, right? So like if you pick a city and like let's say like you live in Columbus and then you have like a school district tax or whatever, like you've got three city taxes, so you've got school district and workplace and residency.
Mhm.
It'll always grab the overflow, right?
Yes, that is correct. Yep,
Like just for any option, like if I was printing by pay group or printing by, it'll always grab the overflows.
yes, it will.
Okay, awesome.
That's
Thank
correct.
you.
Yep, great question. Yep. Okay, we will go back up here. Okay, so again, just make sure that when you're printing, you choose that actual size. They should print, perfect for you. And then we're gonna, make sure that that file then gets sent to the file archive. So there's one last step. When you are under the W-2 forms output file, there's an icon that says, archive, and that's gonna remove the file from the output file grid, and it'll place it in the the payroll archive under the appropriate calendar year-end reports. So if I go back to our screen here, this is the download option. And then if I hover over the middle option, this is the option then that sends it to the file archive. Okay. There's our file. So there's the one that we just created. So we would send that to the file archive, and that would remove this from the list then, from the grid. If you your districts, if you're printing on their behalf, or if they're using the Edge's accountability software, then you would go to the W-2 report and submission option. You would select the W-2 report option tab, and in this case you're going to choose the XML option. So slightly different, right? So we're going to go to W-2 reports, W-2 report and submission. And just like I said, you're going to use the W-2 reports option. So I'm going to click here. And I'm going to click on the XML option. Okay, because that's what Edge's accountability uses for its printing. We do have a note here to make sure that you select the option that matches how you want your employer copies of your W-2s to be printed. Unless something's changed with, and it very well could have, with Edge's accountability, we want to make sure that that sort option is, how districts want to receive their employee copies of their W-2s. And then that's going to generate the XML output. You'll save that XML file, someplace, or districts will save that someplace on their computer. And then however, you probably have instructions then for them to get that file to you. That's probably something that you discuss with your districts in your meetings. So they'll need to get that to you for printing purposes. When it comes to the employer's copy side of things, very similar. When it comes to printing using a file from the payroll side of things, they're going to go to W-2 reports, W-2 report and submission, and they're going to use that W-2 reports option that we just talked about, or select that option using the forms option that we just talked about. Again, go through, make sure everything's entered as expected. And then again, it will start that, once you click generate submission or generate W-2 forms, it's going to prompt and give you that pop-up option or message at the bottom that says that it's generating the forms and they can be found in the W-2 form output file view. So you can go to that view, download that file, just like we walked through before, save that to your, it gets saved to the computer, and then you can print that zip file if you choose for the employer copies. Again, make sure you use that actual size when you're printing. And I think once you choose that, if I remember correctly, the first time, then it kind of defaults to that. It's just, making sure it gets set up that way the first time you print. And then you're probably good to go after that. And then again, like we talked about before, make sure that you select that archived option, and that's going to send that file then to the payroll archive under 2024's calendar year-end reports. And then we have, a step as well to print those using Edge's if you're using the accountability software. You're simply using the same XML file that you did before, and in step, I see we have, write that down too. Man, I'm messing up on these steps. I'll get it corrected too. Sorry about that. I tried to go and triple and quadruple check this stuff and too many steps. It's the same step that we just talked about, in step 35, the section that talks about using Edge's accountability. Okay. And then you might want to sort those, by employee name, if that's how districts wanted those employer copies to be printed, but that's up to them. When it comes to then printing copies for the city, again, if you're using the payroll file, you're going to go to W-2 report and submission, select the W-2 report options, select the output file of forms, and then it's going to, prompt you for all the various numbers and address information, triple check that's entered correctly. And then you would enter that city tax entity code. So that's why that's so important. The code that we talked about checking before, you would actually enter that. Are we on gotta click forms? Oops, W-2 city. Well, that's spinning. Anyway, we can keep going because the steps are here. You would go, and then you enter that city tax entity code. Again, you will be able to select those from a drop down once that enhancement gets released. So you won't have to, go back to the record and look those up. You should be able to select from a drop down that will generate those W-2 forms for that specific city. Again, they're gonna be created and generated in the W-2 forms output files view. So you can go there, download those files, or I'm sorry, download that file, and then submit those for printing using that actual size again for those city copies. Yes, absolutely. Vicki, ask away.
Hi, Lori. Thank you. I'm sorry for interrupting your.
No, please do.
So Neoman at this time still prints the W-2s and all of that for our districts.
Okay.
We were undecided on whether we were going to use the accountability software or just print them off of the system. So when I test printed using like our own files, the forms that we got were the 4-block forms and not the 4 up where it's like the blocks of 4. And when I test printed at Neoman, it worked perfect. But then as you're going through this, for like the city copies in that, can we still use those forms or do we need to get that accountability software?
I would think that the file should work the same. Because, so you're saying like, you would just use, I mean, you use.
Yes, like the district was going to print them, but we're printing them on their behalf.
Yeah.
And
I don't know why it wouldn't work, because, so say, so you would basically be using this step here, right, Vicky? Like
yes.
the district is, and then, okay. So if I generate, one of these forms, or I'll print one here.
Because that's, I use the mailable form. We don't
Yeah.
have city tax for Neoman, but when I printed the mailable form using our own employee files, it printed perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
But then when you were talking about the city tax and we sort those by the city tax, I'm just a little concerned that we're not going to be able to do this how we wanted. Like, I think we may have to get the accountability software.
Well, the city, I don't know why this is just spinning. I'm sorry.
And we could possibly talk about this
Yeah,
later. I don't want to interrupt your entire training.
I'm gonna make a note, and we'll meet and make sure that it's gonna work the way that I'm,
Okay.
because it's just printing the four up copies. I'm thinking that you can use,
Well, we don't have the 4 up. We
but
have the
are
4
you just
block.
printing on
No,
blank?
we're printing them on forms,
Okay,
but they're the 4 block forms where they're perforated into 4 little squares.
yeah, and that's how these are gonna print.
Okay.
So I think you're okay.
All right. Well,
Um,
we'll schedule a time and we'll meet after so that I don't totally disrupt your training.
Okay, no, that's fine.
Does that work?
I think you can just use a different option to print
Okay.
your city copies. Like yeah.
Okay.
Yep, that sounds good. Well,
All right. Thank you.
you're welcome.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. Because like your employer copies, those are gonna print on like the 4 squares. And I think we might be able to use the same option for your city is what I'm thinking, but we'll revisit.
Okay. Thank
Okay,
you.
yeah. Okay, so we were talking about city. And here again, to print those 4 up copies, which I think will work in your case, Vicky. You will select, if you go to the W-2 report option, you'll select forms. Again, you'll select that entity code, that tax entity code for the specific city. And then you can, print those copies for that specific city. We have, the steps down here to send that output file then to the file archive, just like we talked about before, and print those, city copies. If you're using Edge's accountability, again, you'll use the XML file, like we talked about, to print those. All right, and that is like the printing side of things. I'm sorry if that got a little confusing, and I don't know why my instance is just spinning. But again, we've tried to make this very detailed, based on how, what copies you're printing. And then basically, if you're using the payroll file versus Edge's accountability and so forth. So hopefully that those steps will be a little more clear. I think I got rambling and maybe confused all of you. We have before we move on to the submission part, we have a little note here. Again, we had this in the preliminary section, but just to reiterate, before the submission files are created, because the way that the W-2 configuration screen is set up, this will determine how the submission files are created, and what gets put in that header and footer record. So we want to make sure that the configuration option is set up correctly. Okay, so just another check before these submission files are actually created and so they're not created incorrectly. Step 38 is talking about creating your federal submission. So again, we step through every single option. You're going to go, to the W-2 report and submission, the W-2 report option. The type of output is going to be submission. You'll make sure all the, district ID identification numbers, their organization information is correct. You then generate the summary report. Make sure everything, that looks good. You print that report, save it, and then you generate the submission file. So let me see. Sorry, I do not know why this is. There we go. So as we just talked through, we will make sure that all this information is correct. This should default, or I'm sorry, yeah, this defaults for you. And if you have this most recent, if it's already, been run once, then this should automatically populate. Make sure all this information is correct. If they're not resubmitting, this should default to no automatically. These should default to the proper values. If for whatever reason they need to be changed, districts can change those. Here's the report that I was just talking about. So they'll create the summary report first. They can print a copy if they'd like, save it. And then here's the option then to generate or create the submission file. So if we go back to our checklist, then we have once the submission file is created and all of those options, it creates the submission file. And you want to save that. Some districts will save that somewhere on their computer. Excuse me. And it is recommended that that file be compressed. So they can right click on that file and then they'll select the send to compressed zipped folder option, and that will compress the file for them. Excuse me. Once they've created that submission file, we do recommend that districts go to the file archive and go to that calendar year-end report bundle. Make sure that submission file, those reports have been copied, that information has been copied to the file archive. So we've listed here all of those files that should be out there, and you should see. So again, the W-2 report.pdf file, the W-2 tape.txt file, the W-2 mast.txt file for those districts creating and submitting their own files, and then the W-2 data.xml file. So districts want to verify once that submission file has been created that those are out in the file archive. We have had situations where things, aren't caught now, and then, at a later time, and it's way easier to, make sure that those are there now, versus later. So if, you are submitting, if you're an ITC and, they're the district, you are submitting on their behalf, then obviously they're gonna need to get that file to you, somehow. And I'm sure you have, directions to do that. The file itself can be verified through the BSO website. So we have that link listed here. It allows you to run that file through AccuWage. And then, it kind of goes through and checks for any errors, make sure that everything looks good on, to them before you actually upload the file. So, you'll want to run, or districts want to run their file through AccuWage. And then once everything is error-free, through AccuWage, then they can actually, or you can actually use that file, at a later time to submit either on their behalf, or they're going to use that file to submit through, online through the BSO. Okay, and we step through all of those steps as well. When it comes to the Ohio submission file, again, you'll go to the W-2 report and submission option, and you're going to use the W-2 state options tab. So we have that listed here. Again, if I go to W-2 report and submission, there's a W-2 states option, and then you would select Ohio. Again, make sure all your information is entered, everything is correct. And then again, it gives you the summary report, and it gives you the option to create the submission file. So we have all those options listed here, and what, to check for, everything to all the various selection options and report parameters that need to be verified or entered. Again, steps through, creating the summary report. They can print that if they like, and save it. They can then generate the submission file. The submission file then is either w2oh.txt or w2mast_oh.txt. That file then needs to be saved somewhere on your computer. And then again, they would get that file to you if you're submitting it on their behalf, or then they're going to use that file to run through AccuWage, and then upload that file to the Ohio Business Gateway. Again, we have a bullet here to make sure that once they have created their submission file, to go out to that file archive and look in that calendar year-end report bundle, and make sure that the submission files that should have been created and should be out there, truly are there. Okay. All right. When it comes to any other state submission files, I don't know how many ITCs this affects, but as you're all aware, we have the ability to create files for Indiana, Kentucky, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia. So we've, placed the reporting requirements for each state here. And basically, there's very, if the minimums for most are, quite large. So most of you are probably gonna, require electronic filing. But, like Pennsylvania is only, 10, so I don't, or 9, I guess, and under. So I don't know if that would be helpful for any of those or apply to any of those Pennsylvania requiring submission files. But anyway, we've placed those submission requirements here to help know how those files need to be submitted. And if you have a case where you need to generate a submission file for any other states, you know, again, you'll go to W-2 report and submission, and then you will actually, you know, use the W-2 states option again. You're going to enter the appropriate or select the appropriate state. So again, you know, you would be selecting Indiana, Kentucky, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia. Based on the state that's chosen, you can see that the options change slightly based on their submission requirement. So, you know, the developers have keep track of, you know, what each of these states, their filing format requirements are. And so based on that, you'll see, you know, the screens change quite slightly so that all that gets, the submission files get correctly created. Okay. So we step through you know, all of the various, again, parameters for the various states, how those need to be entered or, you know, double check those. There's a couple, again, notes on Indiana and West Virginia, you know, that it only applies to those specific states. So you'll see values for those fields listed on just those states that when you select those states. Once all the parameters are entered correctly, then you'll choose to generate the report, the summary report. That can be print and saved. And then you'll create the submission file. Again, we've listed, you know, the different submission file names. So based on whether you're submitting or that checkbox is marked to submit on your own, or if your ITC is submitting it, depends on which output file name is used. And then again, once that submission file has been created, you know, we suggest that you go to the file archive and double check and make sure that all of the various reports or submission files that apply are out there. Okay, so we've listed all those. And then obviously they need to upload, you know, the appropriate file to the appropriate state's website. All right. Moving on to city. This will allow, you know, those electronic submission files to be created. So we have, you know, creating the submission file by going to W-2 report and submission, and you would select the W-2 city option. So again, if I go back to W-2 reports and submission, not sure why, what's going on here, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm gonna click W-2 city options, and you can see, you know, we have all the various report parameters, how those should be checked, listed on the checklist. So they're listed here. Again, you are gonna wanna select the appropriate tax entity code. So there's an option, you know, to enter the tax entity code that you want to create the city file for, the submission file for. Again, you'll be able to choose a drop down, so you don't have to remember those codes or look them up. And then you can, you know, see, just like the other options we just talked about, there's a summary report option and a submission file option. once they've, created the submission file, again, just like the other submission options we've talked about, they'll want to save that somewhere on their computer. And, that gets uploaded then, to the appropriate city website or, electronically, either by you or, the district. They will want to check the calendar year end bundle, in the file archive to make sure that those, city files, have been saved, out to the file archive. Moving right along to the last couple submission files, those are CCA and RETA. So there are two separate options for these. If we go to W-2 report and submission under the W-2 reports option tab. So if I go back to W-2 report options and I select submission, you can see down below, we have our CCA options and our RETA options. So you can generate, the various reports and those submission options. And we have, again, all the different report parameters, to check for accuracy or enter. And then, obviously they'll create the submission file, save that somewhere, or get it to you securely. And then again, go out to the file archive and make sure that those files are listed under the calendar year end reports as well. So we have the options for CCA. And then if we scroll down, the options for RETA. Okay. All right. Any questions on the creating of the submission files? I know it's a lot. It's like a lot to throw at you. But if you've done it a couple times, it's not any different than past years. For those of you that it's, the first time going through it, I understand it can be a little overwhelming, but hopefully the information that we've provided in the checklist, gives you very detailed step-by-step, field by field instructions that, can help guide you through. The last couple options here, are one to run the, year-to-date report. So this is just, kind of an earnings and benefits summary report, that a lot of districts like to provide their employees at the end of the year, right along with their W-2. So if I go to reports, there's an option called YTD report. This is the report we're talking about. So it gives you, the option to, sort this, if you want to sort this, if this is something that's getting, handed out, then you might want to sort it, how it's, most easiest for, not mailing them, but handing them out individually. You can include or not include compensation information. You can select specific employees if there's just, if that applies. You can select pay groups, you can select by job status. So let's just generate this quick. I did want to include that or add that we do have an issue to have the year-to-date report be deliverable via email. So it's not something that they'll always have to, create and manually get to their employees. Eventually they will be able to be emailed. So if that's something, districts are asking about or looking forward to, it will happen at some point. So here's just, a real quick example of what that looks like. So as I stated, it's just an earnings and benefit summary for the entire calendar year. Okay. This also gets included in, gets included in the report bundle that's out in the file archive. So that's an improvement that we made recently, because that wasn't always the case. So if they would forget to run this, it is out in the file archive as well. It may not be sorted or generated in the manner that works best for them, but it is out there. The next step is creating the W-2 PDF file for ESS. So if you'll remember, in the past, this step was a file that was used by the kiosk application. So now the same process basically takes place. ESS is looking for this file in the same place that kiosk was. So there's no change there. For those districts that use ESS, they would go then to W-2 reports, W-2 archive individual forms. And then we have, all the various report parameters that they'll want to double check or select. We have a special note to choose the sort option that they chose when they generated their employee W-2 print file. That's in step 35, just to make sure that the control numbers match. So if they're looking at their W-2 online, it's gonna look exactly the same as the one that was given to them. Okay, so again, make sure that the sort options are that they choose the same sort options when they generate both of the files in step 35 and 45. Okay, so then we again talk through the different options here to generate the file, and then once the file is generated, it asks you to schedule a date and time. You'll click schedule job and then go to utilities and the job scheduler, and we just want to make sure that that job is out there and it's listed. Once that job's complete, we want to verify that the W-2s are out in the file archive under the W-2 archive folder. Okay, so that's the step, again, that this didn't change from those that were generating this file for kiosk. So it's exactly the same. The last couple steps then in calendar year end are making sure that they go out and they close the December posting period. So they're going to click on that folder icon, and I always like to use the grid that's to the right that says open, close, true or false. So they can see then by looking at the grid whether this is what I'm talking about. They can either hover over these icons or use the true false column that's under open and current to make sure that they've actually closed then December. So open should say false. And then last is to just verify that once they've closed December, that all the calendar year end report bundles are out in the file archive as well. So these are all the various reports that they should see when they close December. That's the trigger. It goes out, generates the attendance journal report, the leave balance report, the payment transaction status report, employee master report, earnings register, and the year-to-date report. So all of those, should be out there if everything's, if everything, that closed period created everything correctly. All right. I know that was a lot. Are there any questions before we follow up with our last few items. All right. We are going to very quickly talk about ITCM. So for those districts that are creating or submitting on your employee's behalf, and you need to take all of those files from your individual districts and combine them into one, you'll use the ITC management program. This hasn't changed, from years past. It's exactly the same. So, you're gonna go through and add all of your districts and get those created first. And chances are, if you've been, submitting their ODJFS file, and things like that, all your districts, could already be listed. We have a checklist, and I thought I had it pulled up, and I don't know that I do. Okay, let's go back. We're gonna get, if I go back to our main page, we have an ITC management option here. And it actually steps you through, kind of the process. So again, all the districts will need to be added. And it steps you through how to add a district. You can actually, mass load those. And if I scroll down here, it explains, the template, what needs to be included in the template, and actually provides a template spreadsheet so you can get all of those uploaded. And then, we have the W2 city option. So that's going to merge, allow you to merge all of your cities. And then your W2 merge option, that's going to allow you to merge all your W2 files. So again, once you have the cities created, this is not, again, changed from last year. You'll actually go and you'll upload each individual city, the files that they've, provided to you for their cities, for their W2 reporting. And then you go through the process of, adding those for the, select all the parameters, like what tax year you're selecting for, upload that file. And then within each of these options, you have the option to merge. So once all your files are uploaded, then you're going to go to the merge tab, and you'll actually, verify all the information here is correct, enter your submitter user ID, and then you start the merge. Once the files merge, then you can go to W2 merge results, and this is going to give us, the actual file. We can download here, we can edit here, and so forth. So again, for those of you that have been using this for like ODJFS, it's the exact same. We're just selecting two different options, W2 city and W2 merge. Okay. All right. I have on our PowerPoint here, I have some links to the resources. If you would want more information, maybe it's your first time doing this. We did a whole Fridays with Fiscal on ITC management. So I've linked that from our YouTube channel here. And then here's the actual chapters in the documentation. Okay. Lastly, then, real quickly, because I know that this isn't gonna happen for a bit, and I feel like we might want to do some kind of follow-up training, Fridays with Fiscal training just on this topic as well, once that gets closer in time. And that's the W-2C process. So again, we have the ability to create W-2C forms and submission files. I've linked the chapters here for, the USPS side of things, and then even the ITCM side of things. And then again, we did, a whole session last February on W-2C printing and submissions. So if you have any questions at all on the W-2C process, these are resources you can use. We also have a W-2C checklist, along with all of our, these are all the different options. And we have a checklist, which I thought I had up here. So in our appendix, since I don't, we go to checklist. We have a USPS W-2C checklist, and this will step you through, creating that, whoops. Oh, that's okay. I'm sorry. So this will step you through creating those W-2C records, running the report, creating the form, and then creating the submission file. Okay. We do have a note here regarding the Ohio state corrections. I know that caused some confusion last year. So this tells you how to go about correcting the Ohio file, forms. And again, there is not, to our knowledge, a way to upload that electronically. So this has to be done via paper. Okay. All right. Are there any questions? Do not see any in the chat. Again, I apologize because we went way over what I expected to time-wise. So I will let you guys go. I hope everybody has a wonderful Friday and a wonderful calendar year end. I will get those few updates made that I overlooked on the checklist. I apologize for that. Vicki, I'll reach out to you about meeting and getting your printing situation figured out. Again, thank you everybody for your time this morning, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you.